everybody. I'm Kat Margulis, and I'm the host of The Power of Story. And as a longtime journalist, author, and book coach, I tend to see story everywhere I go. But in recent years, I've had the opportunity to see how story can also transform lives and businesses. And that's what I want to explore with you and my guests through this series is how you can create the life, the business, and the legacy of your dreams with storytelling. Today, I'm excited to have with me Peter Katz. And Peter is a JUNO Award and Canadian Screen Award nominated singer and songwriter who has spent the past 15 years touring internationally. To date, his music has been streamed over 5 million times, and his music videos have over 20 million views on YouTube. Peter is one of Canada's most in-demand speakers and facilitators, being called on to give his highly customized keynote concerts to hundreds of companies and organizations across various industries, including Bell, Xerox, Lepage and American Express. Peter, thank you so much for being a part of Power of Story.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'm actually going to skip my first question, because as I read that, I'm like, how the hell did this rock star land on a Xerox and Bell stage? So I'd love to hear your story of how you got to the keynote concert.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's many twists and turns to it. But if I think on it, there's a few kind of key building blocks. So the main building block is that for most of my career, I was a touring singer-songwriter, playing 150 to 200 shows a year. I still consider myself a touring singer-songwriter, although not doing it in that same format. But I was doing 150 to 200 shows a year for years and years and years and years and years. And part of my show was always the storytelling piece. And so I would have people say to me, hey, I come to your show as much for the music as I come for the parts that you say in between. And so I knew that was kind of part of what I did. And then a couple of things happened. The first thing that happened was, and this is a whole longer story, but basically this youth mentoring program called Faces had been using my music as part of their curriculum, completely unbeknownst to me. And I played this show in Southern Alberta about 10 years ago, and there was hundreds of people that knew all of my music, and I was utterly confused as to what had happened. And long story short, they had organized this show because they wanted me to come work for them. And they had reached out to my management, who had said, Peter's not a camp counselor, thank you very much. So they organized this show so they could show me directly. And obviously I fell in love with them and the kids and the program. And so I said yes. And I went out there that summer. And fast forward 10 years later, I'm now one of the directors of that program every summer. And it's like this huge part of my life. But the reason it's relevant to my speaking career is that some of the people that run this program became some of my best friends. And my friend Dave, who's a teacher, reached out to me and he said, hey, Peter, I've seen what you do with youth. I see what you do on stage and the power of story and the power of song. And he said, we have these people that come into our schools called keynote speakers. And he said, I think you could combine all those things and it would be a really powerful thing. And in fact, I'll book you to do it at my school if you put something together. And in fact, I'll help you put it together. So, so Dave, just a beautiful human, one of my best friends to this day, helped me write and create my first keynote concert, which was designed for youth. And I did that for several years as just kind of every now and then amidst my touring.
Yeah.
And then several years later, I ended up, again, there's a whole longer story, but I'll give you the shorter version of it. But I ended up being asked to give a keynote to grownups, basically.
Yeah.
And it happened to be for entrepreneurs. And there was just such a strong connection between my life experience as an artist, really an artist entrepreneur, where you're doing something that you're passionate about. You have no idea if it's going to work. There's no set hours, no set paycheck, and the life of an entrepreneur, which basically everything I just said applies. And so I gave this keynote. There was a lot of really important people there in the audience, and they ended up talking about what I did to their agent. Their agent became my agent. And then my speaking career was really launched in the corporate organizational space. Yeah.
Oh, what a great story. I love that. And I love what you're doing with the youth and the leadership. That's an incredible cause that you're a part of. What inspired you to use music as a way to share stories? I'm even curious, like, yeah, that just the fact that that was something early on in your performances, you were including stories in the spaces in between. Do you come from like a storytelling family?
I don't know that I come from well, actually, my brother is a published author. He writes
Okay.
children's books, so certainly there's there's writing. My sister is a philosophy professor, and my other
Cool.
sister, worked in communications, and so there's definitely yeah, I guess there's the power of language certainly in my
Yeah.
family. My mom's a therapist, so there's like, yeah, a lot of communication. But I don't have memories of us sort of sitting around talking about the art of storytelling or anything like that. But I guess I've always seen myself like my entry point into being a singer songwriter and a musician is I'm not really there because I'm on stage. I'm not really there because I'm playing music. I'm there because I'm sharing songs that I wrote. Like that's the thing that makes me drive through snowstorms and sleep on floors and kind of pursue it as doggedly as I have for so many years is that it's a form of expression, and it just happens to be called a song. Um, and so for me it was just kind of the most natural thing in the world to sort of share some of the stories behind them, or to
Mm,
have it be this experiential thing beyond just here's a song and here's a song and here's a song and here's a song. And I'm just reflecting on this in real time as I'm
yeah.
talking to you, but I did my degree in theater, and so um, I also had this background of playwriting and of thinking about performance and shows in a holistic way. So it's not
Mm,
just whatever's happening on stage, it's also the sounds and the lights and the staging and
mhm.
the narrative arc. And so I've always kind of thought about it in that way, like what's the beginning, the middle, and the end, and what are the ups and the downs, and what's the kind of hero's journey over the course of the experience. And um so I guess it just feels like they've always sort of naturally been linked for me.
Yeah, I don't know that all musicians think that way. I think that's incredible. And I even was at a concert last week, and I think with a lot of concerts that I've been to or musicians, that there is like that awkward space between songs that they don't quite know what to do with themselves. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny, and this is in the last couple of years I've also been getting really deep into facilitation, and part of your job as a facilitator is to not let the air out of the balloon, right? Like to
Mm,
keep to keep this space, this
mhm.
bubble, and to have it build and grow in this experience. And so I've always been conscious of how do I keep us in this world that we're building here together. Like part of what I love about live performance is that you start at zero basically. I mean, Chris Rock says that he's like, the first 5 minutes people laugh because I'm famous, and then the rest of the time I have to actually be funny. And so obviously when I sell tickets to a show, people
Yeah.
have come because they generally like my music, but then I actually have to give them something that's good, and that hopefully impacts their life in a positive and meaningful way. And so I feel like I've always thought about it of like, okay, all of these people have hired babysitters, and they've taken their paychecks, and they've taken the bus, or they found parking downtown, or like whatever they had to do. All of this collective energy has come together, not so that they can watch me fail, or like they've come here because they want something, and they want to
Mm,
have an experience, and they want to walk out changed from how they walked in.
mm,
And so how do I honor that? It's I think it's like you think about the entire
mm.
experience, and you make it about them instead of about you. And so for me, yeah, it's not enough for it to just be songs. It's like
Yeah.
what's the whole experience. And I think storytelling and the way that I'm engaging with the audience all around the songs is part of that
Yeah.
bubble.
I think that's incredible. And it's so in alignment with some of the conversations I'm having this week already. Because, as a writer, in the land of books that may take a really long time before they reach the reader, I kind of follow my fairy muse. And what I'm hearing is like just the thinking of the audience first and the person receiving it first, and what is it they need and how do you serve them? And yeah, really, really cool. I'm curious, what did it take you, because it's a personal act, what did it take you to get up on stage and like pour your heart out for people?
Pure folly. I, I think I've often felt like it's almost something that I can't help. In some ways, like I would define it as an affliction. And so like I I don't wish it to no longer be there anymore. So I want to choose my words wisely, because I'm grateful for that part of me that loves to do that. And there's also part of me that's like, can't I just have an experience in my life and not need to turn it into something and process it and make a piece of art out of it? But no, I can't. Like if something significant happens, or if I have a big feeling, or I have a thought, or I just there's constantly this impulse to be like, oh, I should turn that into something. And then once I turn it into something, then I want to share it. Like you want to kind of bounce it off the walls and see what comes back, or fly it up the flagpole and see who's
Yeah.
drawn to it. And so I feel like the I had to do a lot of work to get comfortable on stage, and I was terrified initially of playing my own songs. I in one of my youth keynotes, I talk about the story of playing my first open mic and just like sweating profusely and being terrified, and actually going to this open mic for months without ever signing my name on the piece of paper, because I was just terrified at the thought of doing that. But I had to just put myself up there literally thousands of times, because I knew that I wanted to be great at it, and I was gonna want to do it whether I felt like I should or not. There was like Paulo Coelho in The Alchemist. I'm going to badly paraphrase this, but it basically says, like, once your heart has spoken to you, you can never unhear it. And
Mm,
so my heart had spoken to me, and I knew that this was part of what I had to do. And so I
mm,
just knew that the only way that I would get better at it, and that I would be able to kind of deliver the kind of performances that I imagined being able to deliver, was to just put myself up on stage. So I just put myself up on stage hundreds, thousands of times, and eventually felt like, okay, I'm comfortable in this space now.
love it. Um, and yeah, as a performer, you are getting immediate feedback from the audience. And I'm curious for you, like, how important is feedback for you in what you do?
I mean, I think I'd be lying if I said it wasn't an energizing factor. Like, you can feel, I like that first keynote that I described to you, like for grown-ups, as I say, like I could feel 500 people lean in. And I actually knew that that moment was going to change my life. I called my mom afterwards, and I said, I just changed my life. And and for me, this is a bit of an aside, but that was this revelation that I wasn't limited to one format, that I didn't need to do something called a concert in order to do this thing that I do. And and so that's, sorry, what was the initial question now? I'm
Just,
like, I'm,
just keep going. I'm
yeah,
loving it.
I'm like, I don't think I'm answering your initial question, but
Feedback, but I love it. I
oh yeah,
love it. I
feedback,
love what
right?
you're sharing.
Feedback, right? Yeah, well, in fact, that feedback kind of changed my
Yeah.
life, because I recognized that, oh, I thought the only way that I could do this thing that I'm do is something called a concert. And then I gave a
Yeah.
keynote, and I realized, oh, it's not about it's not about just having a bunch of songs strung together. It's about the feeling. It's about the emotionality of it. It's about the themes. It's about the holding space together. It's like all these variables are really what I try to create for people. and I can do it in a concert. I can do it in a keynote. I can do it as a facilitator, where really I'm just the guide from the side, creating the conditions for people to have that connection with each other.
Yeah.
And so it's funny when you talk about feedback, I'm reminded of being in theater school and of studying clown, and the beauty and the terror of clown is that you know exactly how you're doing, because if you're doing great as a clown, people are laughing, and if you're sucking as a clown, people are not laughing. And so you literally have this live barometer that's going back and forth telling you how you're doing. You don't
Yeah.
always kind of get that uh, in a music concert. You get a little bit of it, like
Yeah.
there's that the extra loud cheer after a song, or the just silence after in a good way.
Yeah.
I imagine as an author you get nothing. And so, yeah. So, but
Yeah, I love it.
but but yeah, I think feedback is important, and
Mhm.
as much as I think it's important, I think you also need to, the first person you need to check in with is yourself,
Mhm.
and ask yourself, like, do I feel proud of what I just did? Do I, like, what are the areas where I could have been more prepared,
Mhm.
or what are the things that I felt as I sang that second verse? Do I think, oh, I'm a little sheepish singing that lyric? Like, I think I could go back and rewrite that lyric, and I could
Mhm.
feel more proud to sing a better lyric. Or so ultimately, I think when I think of feedback, I have to check in with myself first,
Mhm.
and then kind of open myself up to what comes next, and also be willing to kind of suck at something for a period of time where you don't necessarily get the feedback that you love to get, but you're kind of sucking at this thing for a period of time because you're on a
Mhm.
path towards trying out new material, or like exploring something that you don't quite know how to do yet, but the only way that you're going to get there and get the glorious feedback is by sort of bashing around a little bit first.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that willingness to go through that period of time where it's like,
Mm,
this is the step I'm in now. So
yeah.
it's okay. Um, I love that. Uh, you're a speaker, a storyteller, musician. Is there a difference in the way that you tell stories, or the stories that inspire you, regardless of the medium and the place that you deliver, or the way that you deliver them?
I don't think, I mean, I would say, because I also like to write as well, and so like there's a difference between a poem and song lyrics, right? Because song lyrics are sung, and so there's certain sounds that you want to experience, or sometimes you're just like, I don't know why I want to use this word instead of this word, but it
Mm.
comes out in a certain way. And if you look at an artist like Bon Iver or somebody like that, or even Sigur Rós is they invented their own language. They're not even singing words that mean anything. Or Bon Iver, when you or his name is Justin Vernon. When you read interviews with him, he's just picking the words simply for the way they sound. And I mean, I find them kind of poetic when you string them together, but when you really read them, you're like, no one would kind of write this down and say, here, read this thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of like absurdist poetry or something like what's that? There's a famous poem like that about some beast. I'm blanking on it right now.
Yeah.
Um, so so I guess if I'm doing like just a pure piece of writing, or more like an essay style of storytelling, like I just wrote a chapter for a book, um, then there's a different level of like describing, like, let's say we use a room
Mm.
analogy, like you have time to talk about the paint color and the trim
Yeah.
and the curtains, and like you have more time to kind of expand on the scene, whereas
Yeah.
in a song you might have a single line to kind of capture space and time or whatever that might be. So um
Hmm. I love it.
yeah, but
Is
I
there
yeah.
Is there a piece of advice of writing advice that you received that really landed for you or that you carry with you?
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me is that, like, when there's like different stages to creating something, and the most important stage is that initial stage where you're just like digging through the dirt. And in that moment, there is no place at all for your brain. Like, there's no place for an analytical part of you to be on. So, like, one of my favorite writing exercises um, is that I just put on like a random piece of instrumental music or something, or not, or just silence, and I just write. And
Mm.
the rule is that I must not stop writing. Like, I just have to keep writing. And even if I write the word banana 500 times, like, what's the word that's going to come after the 500th banana? And I just write, and I write, and I write, and I write, and I write. And there's always a moment where I desperately want to stop, and that's the moment that I keep going. And so it's like, I mean, Stephen Pressfield, like in the War of Art, like he talks about like resistance, I think is the word that he uses. And there's basically always something that's trying to spit you out, because it's hard, right? It's
Yes.
harder than sitting on the
Mhm.
couch watching Netflix eating pizza. Like, it's harder than that. And
Yes.
so it's your job, I think, to be disciplined enough to just get into the flow and stay
Mhm.
there for as long as you humanly possibly can. Afterwards, by all means, turn that brain on and get into editing, and it's used the same word 3 times, and like, sure.
Yeah.
But the number one thing for me is getting out of the way when you're channeling that that lava. Like,
Mm.
you don't know what you're shaping yet. You're just opening the flow valve.
I love it. I love that. Um, what are the keys to a great story for you?
Well, I think that you want to see yourself in the story. Like, this is from my theater background. Like, when you're an actor and you're playing a villain, for example, you don't sit there and play the villain. You play the truth of that person. And
Mm.
so that person has their life experiences, or maybe their traumas, that are causing them to act in a villainous way. But they're not sitting around thinking I'm a villain. They're sitting around thinking I'm justified in doing whatever it is that I'm doing. And so your job as the actor is to sort of have your humanity meet their humanity in the middle, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, like, a great story, like, opens the door to a new experience, a new point of view, a new adventure. um but there's a place for the reader in there. A friend of mine, Trisha Broke, she's a brilliant performer, and she also, like, kind of coaches speakers on, like, writing their talks and stuff. And I'm using this to kind of give an example of what I'm just talking about. She talks about, like, you share from the scar, not the wound. And so
Oh.
it's such a great
Mhm.
line. And so because when you share from the wound, like, the reader's anxious. They can't kind of meet you there, because they're like, oh my gosh, is this person okay?
Yeah.
Whereas you share from the scar, it's like there's a place for that person to sit next to you and maybe learn the lesson from whatever happened alongside you, or understand what that experience was, or maybe um, kind of compare scars with you from their own
Yeah.
life. So
Love
yeah, I
that.
mean, that's what comes to mind to me is I guess it's like a generosity of care for the
Mhm.
reader, and um or the listener, or the
Mhm.
audience, or whatever that might be. And thinking of like, how am I bringing my humanity to this, but in a way that has a care and thoughtfulness to it.
I love that.
Mm.
I love that. You're exposed to so many audiences, holy
Mm.
moly, and have exposure to you get to receive so much feedback. Are audiences the same wherever you go, and what are they craving?
Audiences are wildly different, and I mean, there's certain through lines because it's all human beings.
Mhm.
It's super interesting because when I'm doing concerts, right, like straight Peter Katz concerts where people are buying a ticket to come see Peter Katz because presumably they either like my music or they're like there's some kind of I have a lighthouse beaming out a light. They see the light. They're like, I like that light. I'm going to go walk towards that light. That's one kind of an audience. And um, that's a nice place to start where you already kind of have the benefit of the doubt. And then obviously, as I said, you still have to then be good and surprise and delight them and make them go on a journey with you. But what's been interesting, because I do so much work in corporate and different organizations, is there's a larger homogeneity sometimes to a different audience. Like my music audience, people are from all different walks of life, and they're all like they're still the kind of people that are resonating with what I'm doing, which does there's
Yes.
some element of selection to that. But I when I go in and speak to an accounting firm that's like they're all accountants, or and I go in and speak to uh, healthcare, or they're all nurses or whatever that might be, and there's a certain people are drawn to different professions, or they're like
Mhm.
there's a difference between a room full of high risk entrepreneurs and a room of accountants. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I'm saying there's just different personality types.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain thoughtfulness and care that I think is required to think about each of those audiences. Um, and and I think a great performer or speaker or whatever is able to really tune in to the temperature of the room. And
Mm.
it's not that you it's not that you don't do your thing. You still do your thing, but you figure out, how do I meet this audience in the middle? Um,
That.
and But to answer your question of like sort of what are people looking for in a more general sense, what I do notice is, and this is kind of more than ever, is like pre-pandemic, I would say I had to make a bit of a business case sometimes to organizations as to why it was important to bring people together and create a sense of community and do some of this more heart stuff and this appreciation and celebration and gratitude and this kind of stuff. And I had to like explain that a little more. I don't have to
Mhm.
do that anymore because organizations are desperate for their people to feel seen and appreciated and celebrated. And they're desperate for um, to like get at the deeper stuff of what it means to be a human being, because we've all just been so deeply knocked off center by the last many years, whether that's obviously with the pandemic, or whether that's politically or globally. Like there's just a lot of things that are happening in each and every one of us that we're like processing in the background, and it's leading
Mhm.
to things like burnout and great resignation and all these different kind of buzzwords that we hear, mental health crisis, all these kind of things. Not that that's a
Mhm.
buzzword, but um, so I think what every human being needs right now is somebody paying attention to the fact that, hey, yes, I'm trying to do all these things, but I'm just a human being under here. And as a human being, I'm scared sometimes. I feel vulnerable sometimes. I need to feel connected and seen and heard and appreciated and noticed. And so that's what I think every audience needs, no matter who I'm speaking to. And that's the space that I try to fill and provide.
I love that. I'm kind of getting choked up right now. Thank you.
Mhm.
Like, oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for that. Um, Gosh, well, I'm just going to end on that note because it's a beautiful note. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we go today?
Uh, well, I guess something that I like everybody to know, this is a bit of a mandate of mine, and I don't know that I've really said this out loud that much, but I really see everybody as a storyteller, as a creator. And I've never liked this line in the sand between, oh, that person's an artist or that person's creative and I'm not. Because I remember when my mom was about to retire, she worked as a therapist and she worked as a nurse. And then in her final kind of phase of her career, was a she ran like a visiting nurses association. So she kind of put both hats on. And one of her final projects was she built this day center for seniors that they could come and drop in and socialize
Mm.
and she gave me a tour of the place, and she's like, okay, like, well, this is, we put the entrance here and we hung this here so that they would see this and feel this way, and then okay, we put the chairs over here, and then the kitchen is here so that you can still be talking to people while you're in the kitchen, and then there's a special room over here with for people that have dementia and need sort of little sensory stimulation. And I was looking at my mom and I was like, oh, like my mom's an artist because she's thinking creatively and she's making choices and putting things together. And then you look at the way a teacher teaches their class, or the way a parent parents their child, or like there's a million ways
Mm.
that we are all creative and having to like put things together that haven't necessarily been put together. And so my encouragement to people is to just see yourself that way. Know that you're having an experience, you're constantly processing information, you're constantly putting things together. Nobody else is having the exact same experience as you. And just kind of trust that there's a little antenna on the top of your head that stuff is beaming into, and like show some respect and love to that antenna and be curious about it and say, hey, antenna,
Mm.
like, what do you want me to know? Or how do you feel about this thing? And I don't know, put your fingers on the keyboard or pen to paper or open a
Mm.
voice memo and see what comes out. I'm always beautifully surprised by what happens when you give people a platform to express themselves.
Oh, I love that. All the good feelings today. Thank you, Peter. That was wonderful. Thank you for being on the show and sharing your beautiful, authentic, generous self with this audience.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, everybody, there will be deets on Peter for more information in the show notes, and know that there's a Power Story workshop happening October 24th. Info on that to come, and more amazing interviews on their way. So thank you, Peter. Thank you to you guys watching at home, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.